as we hit 6 a.m., Second Corps begins its move down. Now, they're also using the unfinished railway because they know about it. The Confederates don't. It's very unlikely that'll end up happening. Confederates have a pretty good chance of learning about it, but it's just not been happening. Union learned about it fairly late. It's helpful right here just because it lets me extend my line. But it's not like the Confederates can't defend against that. This is one of the points that was Slagonics brought up, which is that without the double blind, it's really unlikely that you get Longstreet's attack on that historically happened. And likewise here, the attack could happen, but the surprise is unlikely to happen. Here too, though, there's no real surprise. But it's not just because the units aren't hidden. It's the fact that the cut is on the map. As long as you know it's there, you can throw some troops up to cover that line fairly easily. So I don't really view that as that big a deal. The only way you could really cover this is to either put some sort of restrictions that you're not allowed to defend along that terrain, which is goofy. I mean, I'm sitting straddling this road. Obviously, I might be defending along it. Now, of course, that's right here where the railroad is near the main pike. And once you get out here more, it could give you a good drive forward. So you could see it where even if you were playing with the hidden movement, you wouldn't likely be defending angled that way. So there, at least you could make the argument that the attack makes some sense, but still, without the hidden movement, units that are moving through these woods, etc., everybody knows about them. Of course, the chance of not knowing about them is kind of difficult. This is one thing I like about the line of battle. It starts hinting to some interesting things. One thing it hints at, and I'm thinking about starting to, pull in some of those ideas. One thing it hints at is when you come to a road, a crossroad, you kind of make a die roll and see, hey, did you get lost and take the wrong turn? That's always, that's something that happened quite often in Civil War battles because the maps were crappy. It wasn't clear. These roads aren't terribly well marked. It's not like today's street signs. And then there's the idea of an axis of defense. So, if I had an axis of defense running across the road here, I wouldn't be allowed to simply refuse a flank easily. I have to make an initiative roll to do so. In some cases, I think it's goofy, like if the enemy's approaching you from a clearing, although there were instances, I believe, where Spring Hill comes to mind for some reason, where units were just so out of position and nobody was giving them orders to position them right. In terms of that, I think Murfreesboro had it too, where units are just not facing in the right directions when the attack comes. So I'd say there's some possibility of that, but if you don't have line of sight, afflict that check with a penalty, or whatever, because then it comes down to, hey, did your scouts see them coming like you see them coming? And that kind of thing, sort of this abstract scouting. Are you aware of something? When you're playing solo, you can very easily say, am I aware of this? Can I react to it? But honestly, you could do the same in an opposed game. Just some sort of scouting roll based on the distance, etc., where you just, can you react to that? Because you have to be pretty honest with yourself in this game to deal with the orders anyway. Even if you're playing opposed, you have to be honest with yourself as well as your opponent. And it's that introspective element to the game that, makes it maybe outside of what some people feel comfortable with. As opposed to, like Bismarck, where you could cheat about where your piece is, but, that's pretty clearly cheating. That's being dishonest just with your opponent, really. You're cheating at that point and whatever. Anyway, looks like Longstreet's due to come in. That's the Longstreet coming in down in the south here. as opposed to up around here, which means a 4-point victory point penalty. But as Grant, I could be pretty certain, since I don't see Longstreet on the board, that I know he's not there. So that's kind of the thing. If you're within a certain range of units, you can react to them. Well, that would mean Grant wouldn't be able to issue his orders until he's sure where Longstreet is, which means one of his subordinates would have to see it, would have to have scouts that see it. And then there would have to be time for that information to get all the way up there. And we're going to see a much, much faster type of reaction. Of course, there are additional hindrances from the system. Notably, Burnside's is given a terrible rating here, and when we get on here, we're going to see, you know, some sort of delay rating, which could take several hours. So that sort of abstracts away that issue, but it's possible that, you know, first of all, it feels wrong because Grant is issuing the order as soon as Longstreet comes on the board, and secondly, Burnside, and then he goes off and does other things. So in your mind, you're saying, wait a minute, what actually happened here? If it was a written order, it wouldn't be quite as bad. And then there's another issue, which is, look, if you start tweaking the system, there is some stuff baked in to take care of this. Although I feel like armies are a little too responsive anyway, so I don't feel too badly in being able, in having that limited a little bit more by, say, a scouting role as well. I think a lot of players would be really unhappy if orders were less responsive than they are straight up. A little screw up that didn't really have any effect. Straggle recovered in the 5:30 turn instead of the 6 o'clock turn. I could have set up my Confederates in 5:30 the way I did in 6. So, you know. Otherwise, I don't think it had an effect, except maybe the Union got some extra rolls. I don't know. But over here, there may have been a couple of units that I left behind to recover. No biggie. The Union has left their breastworks here, launching the attack. And they're facing the Confederate breastworks. Now, breastworks are kind of weird. They're not trenches, but they're close. They have the same morale effect. Oh, no, they have a +1 morale effect, I'm sorry, instead of a +3 that the trench gives. And they also, instead of giving a column shift, which trenches do, they give you a -1 to the die roll, which is ever so slightly less effective. But it means we're going to take a lot less casualties here. But the units are less willing to stand and die in the trench works. Meanwhile, the Confederates are setting up the line here. Anderson has taken the lead position here, but there are weak units, like Heath's command over here is not in great shape where the outflank is going. We have Longstreet beginning to come on the board. Since he came on, Grant, who's up here, writes. He can't talk to Burnside. Lucky I looked that up and saw it. Some orders to Burnside. Now, it's still good that he was up here because he gets a better turnaround time. But, you know, that's kind of the cheating factor in terms of, hey, I shouldn't know where Longstreet is, what's up. But maybe I have some information that he's coming from the south. There's so much potential for such information to have already been transmitted that I don't really feel too terrible about it. It's just, and I actually feel like the hidden movement game, although it has some corrections for, you know, possibility of discovering something that's moving, they're fairly limited. So you wouldn't get the off-map information at all. And I think that there's some chance that if Longstreet is moving here and there's some Union presence, as evidenced by the troops that have moved there down in the Spotsylvania area, you would perhaps get pickets that reported back, hey, there's a force moving down here, which would allow this kind of reaction. we'll pretend that's the case, depending on how quickly Burnside actually reacts. I actually spent a force point. Ever since the version 3 rules came out, I've been very loath to spend force points because they're a limited quantity. Now, Grant has a ton of them. He has 16, but they last for the whole battle. And the more of them they spends, the more difficulty he starts having in terms of writing other orders. So I think this gives a, I don't know if this gives a penalty. Maybe it's after the 16 that he starts taking a penalty. I don't remember. I just remember I hate spending them now because they're a limited resource. Yeah, here we go. So, yeah. So after the 16, they start generating a penalty. So once he hits 18, he'll have an anti-initiative of 1. With a good leader, it's probably not that big a deal. But usually, I don't want to spend force points anymore. Whereas in the old system, and I like this better, in the old system, you always did your orders at force 2 because it was better to give less orders per turn. The only cost to the force was the cost of the order itself, and anyone could pretty much give a force the most complex order, a written force 2 complex order, complex in the sense that it's an attack order. Almost any leader could give that. I think even a 0 can give that. So 5, 6, 7, 8, 11. No, 0 can't quite get away with that. So they have to make a choice. But in general, leaders are able to throw off an order. And the thing is, the way the charts work and the delays work, you want the best possible first result. You don't want necessarily to be throwing out a whole bunch of orders at once. Got the reinforcements coming up this way. And once Grant and Meade get back to the headquarters, they will start writing some additional orders because we know where the Confederate forces are dispositioned. Now, if I was playing an opposed game with options available, I wouldn't know. Maybe there's another unit. Maybe Pickett's kicking around and he's been assigned a different location. But I'm not too worried about Pickett without ammo supply. But I might end up dispatching a reserve or keeping a reserve that I can dispatch that way. I sort of have one in these couple independent units, but they're not really capable of handling a division. On the other hand, I'm not sure how much 5th Corps is capable of being a main battle force anymore. So I'll probably just detach a division. I think it's only still allowed to detach 1, even if Hancock's allowed to have 3. He's basically allowed 1 out of each corps. And I'm more likely to attach to 6th Corps than anything else. 9th Corps got orders to go down to Brock's Crossing and hold it. Longstreet's orders, come up to Trigg, grab this because it's worth victory points, and then march up to Brock's Crossing because he does not know about the unfinished railroad bed. If he finds out about it somehow, he could do an initiative roll and change his orders to use that, and I would certainly do that. But Brock's Crossing is important, and then coming to slam behind the 2nd Corps. So 2nd Corps is in a lot of danger if the very alert and capable Burnside doesn't get down there in time to defend. So that should be kind of interesting to watch. Okay, now it's 7 a.m. Grant and Meade show up back here. 2nd Corps is proving that they're in no condition to be making this assault. There, you can see they made contact this turn almost everywhere. They were forced back. On top of that, the defensive positioning of the breastworks, etc. This doesn't work. You can't assault the defensive position like this. I'm beginning to consider trying to cancel those orders and just hold what I have. Maybe fling back to the crossing here because it's obvious that we can see where Longstreet's coming in. And in fact, we're going to have a hard time because there's a decent amount of points down here that Longstreet's going to grab. So we may actually have to go on the offensive, and we don't really have a unit that's in good shape. 6th Corps is, I mean, they're all so beat up that they're ready to get wrecked on heavy fighting. It's not like the Confederates are all that much better, but Archer here, Anderson here at the front, and then some of Wilcox is in good shape, if I recall correctly. Not terribly. Yeah, it's pretty much Anderson that's holding the line there. But being able to get him thrown into the front, I'm not making any headway there. And then over here, there's some good stuff here too. So the Confederates are in better shape. Now, let's see, we made some rolls. Grant is happy. I took a negative turn because this was not pleasant, but Grant is happy with the situation. But Burnsides and Meade are both down at 1. Now the Confederates have no real reason to believe this. They're going to let the Union maybe fail a little bit more before they start calling on rolls on anyone. I'm also not sure if they go for Grant or Meade. They have no idea who's in worse shape or whatever. Confederates on their side, Longstreet discovered the railway, so he might make a roll for initiative, as I was saying, to try to amend his orders a little bit. Of course, the danger with that is of the loose cannon. This isn't like line of battle where you can kind of make an initiative roll for little modifications instead of big ones with less risk. Would make sense either way. Anyway, Burnsides didn't overcome his delay yet. And here it is. This might be the game. I just rolled a 3 for the Confederates, trying to keep Hill's Corps where it is. Now Hill is not a terribly good leader. He would need a 6 or more, but he's got a 2-point bonus because of defensive orders. Still needs a 4 or more, and a 3 doesn't do it. He's got to do an emergency corps retreat. There isn't a lot of room back here. And it looks like 2nd Corps won, even when, you know, they had really insurmountable odds. There's no way that they could have gone forward. Now, we'll see. It's possible that they might fail their continuation. Much more likely that they'll fail their continuation to attack than the 3rd Corps failed it. But here's the thing. The best of possible worlds for the Confederates was the 2nd Corps keeps grinding against this shit. And now that's not going to happen. Let's see. Longstreet starts swinging around here. Burnside's not doing anything. Meade went over here to give some orders to Sedgwick to start the attack this way, because the 2nd Corps is still plowing in. And not a lot of damage, but you know, I lost all that big defensive terrain, lost the artillery being deployed. You know, yeah, I can manage to get it deployed right on the road or maybe in these clearings, but it's really tough to get it deployed in the woods and without the breastworks and everything, and it's just not it's not the way it was. I got a couple things to clean up. I got some low ammo here to remove. Okay, that puts us at 8 a.m. Nothing's really changed except the Confederates pulled down this unit of cover, and they managed to get orders to stretch across and keep falling back if need be. But 2nd Corps still coming on and still pretty potent. The only problem is, you know, it's still tough to fight in this crap. If your units aren't in good shape, and theirs are not, they move forward, they get shaken for the most part, and then they get driven back to a large extent. They got a little bit more firepower in play, though, in part because there's this clearing here that they can fight in. Those clearings are dangerous things. They're kind of neat if you're at the edge of the clearing, because you get some artillery fire if the enemy pokes their nose out. But the enemy can sit here. 3, okay, that ends up shaking them. 4, 5, right? And if they walk to right here, you get 1 round of extra artillery fire, which is kind of the advantage for the defender of being in a field. The disadvantage is they're not facing an enemy, in the case of the Union, that's getting disrupted, well, shaken, by moving through the woods. And that's really causing the Union problems here. 32nd Corps still making some headway here and actually doing fairly well. You can see they're holding up over here. Over here, they got blown back in the center in here, but of course Longstreet's coming, and that's scary. Burnside started moving. He's not going to get there in time. Nothing else went. 6th Corps got orders to come attack, but that's not going to happen. That might be the escape route from Longstreet, if I can knock the Confederates off this tuning hill here. To say things are looking about as bad for the Union right now as I've ever seen things happen for any side in a CWB game, except maybe Embrace an Angry Wind up there. That's really nasty. And yeah, we'll get to that soon. That's next in line. Yeah. 2nd Corps fails. It's attack stoppage. Now, I may not want to be as far forward as I am. I think the problem is I've got 2 guns the way I am, and I think that's going to slow down. Yeah, I'm going to stay like this. That's going to slow down Longstreet. But they come colliding in, and wow, they just saw Longstreet's column. I moved these artillery far enough, they're not going to be able to fire. You can unlimber and fire, but you can't move and fire. We've got an attempt to withdraw away, and the Confederates can probably do a little bit of moving forward and some desultory engagement, but not very far without orders. So we may well see an initiative roll here for Hill, and if that doesn't go off, Lee will be there with orders for them to push forward, or maybe he'll send them to the 2nd Corps, which is a bit more combat capable at this point. The problem is 2nd Corps is sitting here in a place that, if these guys are moving, is of extreme importance, and I don't really want to give up the defensive terrain that I've taken there unless I'm swapping another unit in. I don't really have another unit to swap in without giving orders to 3rd Corps to take up position here. So to some extent, I kind of feel like I'd like to move 3rd Corps forward and attack with them. That's going to be tough to get them moving, though. They'll take the attack order as well as they ever would, but they're just not in great shape, especially Heath here. I can detach him. Using Anderson and Wilcox, Anderson especially, got some firepower there. And I've got all of Longstreet coming. On the other hand, we got Burnside's coming down. I don't think he has attack orders, though. The 1-5 does. They have orders to fight their way through to the 2nd Corps, basically. But they're not a terribly healthy force. And I don't think they're enough to really put much of a challenge up to Longstreet. So, you know, I mean, there's a way to try to escape through the woods here, but it's just not pleasant. The Confederates can pull it off a little better than the Union can. So I think we're going to quite possibly see the near destruction of 2nd Corps here. Of course, things might change if I can throw another corps in or whatever, but it just does not look good right now. And you know, I don't want to roll. I've used up 1 roll on both sides for making a call on people. I don't really want to make my roll on Meade, which would be the more interesting one, because if you make it on Grant, he withdraws and gets victory points for withdrawing troops. And I haven't really looked at that and thought about how well that's going to work. That kind of scares me. If either side can force the overall commander to withdraw, I think it doesn't really end up as powerful a victory as if you don't do that, and can win the battle on the field. And by knocking Meade out, I make it easier to win the battle on the field, because then Union command structure, which, you know, there's this special relationship between Grant and Meade, and Grant is able to just issue an order for free to Meade, and then Meade gives it to someone else, but the someone else still has to roll their acceptance. Basically, you have an extra tier in there that adds a little bit of annoyance to the whole situation. But if Meade fails, it starts becoming you have to actually roll to get Meade to accept the orders, or if he gets wounded, which would be a major pain in the ass for the Union to have that extra tier actually like go through normal orders process. I had a bit of wind yesterday. Now before I play, I think it's time for me to get my rocks off. 9:30 breaks. Over here we had Longstreet charging the guns that 2nd Corps put in place, and they took quite a few out. You got some here damaged. There's like 3 missing there, another 2 somewhere else. I've been able to protect this gun, use some units in column to screen it, which you might say is a terrible idea, because, you know, actual casualties mean something, but and guns don't for victory points. But the thing is, the casualties were wrecked units. Probably a totally unreasonable thing to do in terms of if you try to picture, hey, you men go mill around in front of those guns there and attract fire. But, well, weird things sometimes happen. 2nd Division of 2nd Corps managed to get the 1 remaining unit. The other 2 were sacrificed in place so that they could rout some of Longstreet's troops on a very lucky morale check. Lucky for the Confederates, that is. And for the Union, it was a Confederate check. Over here, 3rd Corps doesn't get initiative, but I'm trying to move them forward. Now, 2nd Corps has got a real problem, which is namely Hancock, who's in this ambulance. It hasn't been an issue so far because he's been able to move along the roads. But that's unlimbered artillery in terms of movement rate, and has a really tough time if he has to go off-road into the wilderness. I've never faced a situation like this. It's hard to tell, you know, would Hancock say, men, go without me, and send the Corps headquarters, which actually would work. And then I guess there's no real harm to that, to tell you the truth, because he'll teleport to whatever unit gets on, but is nearest if he gets stepped on. I think there may be a casualty check. You know, it's not something I'm used to seeing as a Corps commander wandering around on his own at risk like that. And over here, we have this part of 5th Corps here, the 1st Division, which has been sent to attach to 2nd Corps, but it's been given orders to fight its way through. So they should engage, but that's not going to be enough. 9th Corps, in all its glory, is spreading out down the road. I had to send them new orders. No harm in sending them written orders, except it's going to take a while for them to get there. Basically, as Burnside's is marching this way, the orders are still heading for Burnside. But, well, he should probably get moving or something, in case I have new orders to give him. That's about it. Still nothing moving here. Okay, we're moving into 10 a.m. and 2nd Corps has one more chance to get initiative, or else they're popping out of there. And whatever is happening, they are getting popped like an ugly zit. The question is, of course, whether 3rd Corps can continue the attack. Remember, they're pretty hosed, so they may fail their advance, in which case it sucked to leave my defensive positions. Of course, I can rebuild what I had. Those aren't very important. What is important is these line. I have to hold that till noon so that I can get something like this. These are counters from Desert War, an old SPI game. They seemed appropriate. They're going to serve as my actual entrenchments, and I've got entrenchment lines here and here right now. Those are permanent fixtures with significantly more defensive benefit. What do they give? They give a column shift, and they give a 3-point morale bonus in terms of levels of that. They do not give a nothing gives a straggler result, which I kind of I'm a little iffy about that. It feels to me like if you're defending in a trench line, it's less likely you're going to wander off somewhere. Breastworks, well, those are pretty makeshift, but once you get into a real trench, that seems hard. Anyway, Longstreet's got a little bit of a rear guard here because he's facing that 5th Corps unit, which is charging forward, and Longstreet pulled back, which clears the way for Burnsides to go settle himself at Brock Crossing, which is what his orders actually are, if he doesn't accept the other orders. 6th Corps still not doing anything, and it's time for me to go shopping. Right here at 10:30, well, the 10 o'clock turn, the Confederate attack kind of slowed down and stalled a little bit. Nothing major, no attack failures or anything, just a matter of reorganizing and preparing. Some light attacks, well, some pretty significant stuff in terms of hand-to-hand fighting. We're having some bitter charges and stuff. I had a bloodlusted unit ran over a few guns. But it's given a little bit of a breather, and 2nd Corps, Hancock got an initiative, so he's beginning to inch his way out. He's trying to make his way down to Trigg, which kind of cuts off all those points that the Confederates got for coming in from the south, and now, you know, they're cursing themselves, right? At least if he gets away. And the way the orders are written, it doesn't look like the Confederates are going to be able to continue chasing 2nd Corps. You know, it's not going to be an effective unit, but it can hold Victory Point terrain. Meanwhile, the little piece of 5th Corps here is beginning to engage. And Burnsides is heading down. And 6th Corps is on the move. It's going to be making an attack against Shuning. Whatever. Yeah, what we're going to see there is that's going to be interesting because 6th Corps is not in all that healthy a shape. It's not bad, but you know, everything's gotten pretty chewed up except 9th Corps and 1st Corps here. But these are not terribly weak units, and they've dug in a little bit. If it gets to noon before I get there, they actually will be entrenched fully, which leaving the trenches here. They get to stay. That's the difference between the trenches and the breastworks, among other things. And Grant thought this is a pretty good turn, actually, given that he's getting to extricate Hancock. So he rolled at an advantage. He and Meade rolled at an advantage. I'm not giving Burnsides an advantage. I only give Burnside what he views from his point of view of the field. And Meade is only going to worry about the Army of the Potomac, but Grant worries about the whole battlefield in terms of his impression. I don't know if 6th Corps is going to make it by noon. Probably. It looks like they'll be getting down around here, and that'll cut at least this part of the line off, and only really the front part is ready by noon, I think. See, we started some new entrenchments over here. 2nd Corps, under fire. They failed their core defense check, essentially, which would have allowed them to continue their orders back to here. Instead, they're planting the headquarters here, and they're going to be, you know, having to rely on another initiative to try to move the Corps again. 9th Corps still doesn't have its orders, is beginning to string up here. The 1st Division of the 5th Corps failed its attack orders and has pretty much given up trying to connect with 2nd Corps. They're kind of in a no-order state. They can stick around in that for a little while. If they don't do something about it, though, they got to walk back to rejoin the 5th Corps and just say, you know, hey, it didn't work, man. We see the 9th Corps is here. They'll take care of it. They'll save the 2nd Corps, right? Alrighty. And this 11:30 comes now. 2, 3. We're in range now that the Union is going to prevent building, which means basically, unless I can repulse them, after I repulse them, I have about an hour of building left to do. before I get entrenchments here. If they don't come much closer, I might be able to get some of these entrenchments built. I'm not sure. Otherwise, I've just got breastworks, which are pretty decent. Over here, both 3rd and 1st Corps, and I got kind of some screw up here with this unit, for example. Should have stayed in command up here. That kind of screw up just constantly happens. I consider it, you know, the vagaries of war. If I don't notice a unit and it ends up attached to another unit accidentally, shit like that happened all the time, intentionally. So what the hell? I'm less likely to do it intentionally. But anyway, between 1st and 3rd Corps, they've mostly driven the Union's 2nd away. Hancock's still here. He can't move very fast. I think I can still put a little bit of pressure right on the tail end of that and maintain the orders that I have. The orders that I have are to march up, to continue down the plank road. But, you know, they do have to kind of secure the road and to do so a few hexes out from it to engage seems reasonable. It doesn't seem reasonable to pursue these guys. One thing that I've always felt was missing, and I've mentioned this in other CWB games, and I'm pretty sure I mentioned it actually in the LOB Last Chance for Victory up there. Sweet system, by the way. Much, much more streamlined. Is that there's sort of no pursuit rules. And Last Chance for Victory, well, LOB kind of nails it down to your orders are supposed to be geographic. The CWB wasn't that clear. So some units had orders that didn't appear geographic in some of the CWB games. This, I think, was one of them. So I could have conceivably written orders like pursue 2nd Corps to the ends of the earth or something like that. I mean, eventually I'm going to fail my my attack continuation and we'll have a corps stoppage. So it's not like it's a forever thing. But I did not write those that way. I wrote them to head back up to the Brock's Crossing. Everything's heading there. 9th Corps heading there. That's going to be the big fight. 9th Corps fresh. 1st mostly so. 3rd definitely not. And also 6th Corps making its way down. We're in here. Almost to the field. The fighting's going to start over there too. I don't think we got a 3rd day in us. It's just a matter of, you know, these armies were almost wrecked enough after one day, after half a day, that the 2nd day we see under any fire things kind of started dissolving pretty quickly. Well, I just don't think there's enough there to hold for a 3rd day. Okay, so a little while ago, and I didn't mention this, I was wondering about one of those commands where I hadn't seen a unit in a while. Part of the 1-5 division. The Union had 115 and 315 in battle here, and I didn't know what happened to the 215, but I assumed they were attached somewhere, and I just didn't have it noted for some reason, but it must have been kind of accidental. No, they sort of just pooped out here in the woods and sat down, or in the plains here and sat down. It's one of those inexplicable things. And it's the kind of thing that really you can explain. Well, it's inexplicable, right? You can say, well, look, there was lots of weird shit in battles, etc. But it's just, it's the kind of thing that the game system itself doesn't allow. And a player like me will curse themselves if they catch themselves doing something like that, especially in a more competitive type of game. But in something like this, I kind of like to look at it and say, well, yeah, you know, they just plopped down and couldn't make it any further for some reason. So 2nd Corps begins to straggle away to go lick its wounds, essentially. 9th Corps, Longstreet managed to hit that. They pulled back, formed up a better line, and have a pretty sturdy position right now. Longstreet's more powerful than the 9th Corps, but there's a chance that they might be able to withstand it because of the defensive advantage. 5th Corps, well, 1st Division, 5th Corps, getting together and going home saying, hey, we screwed the pooch on this one. Sorry, guys. 6th Corps positioning themselves for the attack still. They're doing this very slowly and methodically. And the problem is, well, they couldn't have gotten here in time, but now there's 4 entrenchments here. And more back here will start showing up as time passes. I don't have the exact times on these, so I'm going to have to fake them. I'm out of these little markers, so I'm starting to put breastworks on the board to indicate permanent entrenchments. If breastworks are alone like that, I'm just going to have to remember, hey, I'm hoping I won't need too many more, but if it does go another day, I may have to try to scavenge some from somewhere else. So we push to 1 o'clock. Things are heating up again. Over here, Longstreet launched an attack, and oh boy, was that kind of ugly, because Burnside's had cannons positioned, and he just basically knocked all of Longstreet's troops back. But then Burnside's got his attack orders underway and launched a counterattack, and also got largely pushed back, not 100%, but you can see, you know, he's got like cannons over here that could be easily attacked from a flank or something like that. Really, really ugly situations going on here. And then his center ran back to where it was. Over here, 6th Corps, man, it's no fun attacking just the breastworks here. I don't have much of a unit, and I'm just running against so much more than I've got. This game really, really, with the weaker units, lower morale. Some of them are pretty big, but that doesn't really matter except on defense. On offense, you don't get in with the low morale. And yeah, I mean, you could close combat, and you get one shot in and then you're wrecked, you know? With some of these like huge D units. I've got a unit here on the 9th Corps. What the hell was it? It had like, it's a huge unit and it broke on 2 boxes or something like that. I think this guy, it's an AB unit. It breaks on 3 boxes. This is very different from most of the system. The designer actually specifically made units worse than their morale for the Union and better than their morale for the Confederates to kind of show the willingness to fight in this particular engagement. Anyway, with both sides really pretty much hosed, it's going to be tough to get much fighting done during this second day. We're going to start seeing, you know, units giving up or wanting to give up. I kind of want to send Lee down here because as far as I'm concerned, so here's the thing. Right now the Confederates own this space and are getting like 4 victory points for it. They have no right to it as far as I'm concerned. The last game I played had a Barren victory, I believe. It's the last one I played. I believe that's the one that had it. Had a really interesting rule where if you can't trace to a victory point area on the roads, you don't score it. And I think that's kind of how I feel here. Still, if the Union were to get any points for this, I think they would have to actually occupy it. But I don't think they'd get any points for it. I think they should be able to deprive the Confederates points because there's just nothing, whatever's down here, if there's some little picket down there or something, it means nothing. But it might mean something if there was a roadway traced. So I'm kind of considering, I sent Lee over to try to send 3rd Corps down this way, but man, I don't know that Longstreet's going to hold. On the other hand, I don't know that he's not, you know. He's not going to make much ground, but I don't think Burnside is either. Question is whether 3rd Corps can take this territory and kind of regain the points that are over here and force the Union back. And I feel like that's probably the best thing I can do because I think I've got this hill held. I think chances are I'm not going to lose too much ground to Burnside here. Although I'd like to give up my attack orders and fall back into a defensive line. And then so this becomes the big victory point swing that I could conceivably get. Unless I wanted to launch some sort of attack up this way. There's a few points up here, no doubt. And here at 130. Not a lot's changed. Second Corps making its way back here. Longstreet has failed his attack continuation. Burnside is still kind of pushing, but not so hard, and even less hard. 6th Corps is running up against things here. You can see they made some headway over here. Not much, but a little bit. We'll see. I don't have much hope for any of these big attacks doing anything. The only one I have a hope for is 2nd Corps just kind of collapsing under its own weight if Hill can get at it. Hill's got orders, but he's under a D1 right now, and I should actually move Lee back. And entering 130. Union beginning to fortify down here, entrenching here as well. It's just breastworks, but as Burnside has decided not to continue his attack. 6th Corps is continuing their attack. Longstreet pulled back. He doesn't have orders, so if he'd come under continued fire, he would have been in trouble, actually. Small arms fire. 6th Corps is basically breaking itself on this further. I did a recount of casualties. I did this because, well, they seemed a little high, and I wanted to make sure I was correct. Well, I was off, as usual, by not counting some rather than counting them. Union casualties right now are at 24,300. Now, that's, you know, combat ineffective, dead, wounded, serious injuries. Whereas the Confederates are at some 1,600. No, 16,000. 16,000, nearly 17,000 there. Now, the historical losses here were about 18,000 for the Union and about 10, 11,000 for the Confederates. So we're in that same sort of, I would say, proportion. But as usual, when I play any Civil War game, the casualties just mount up much higher than the historical record would indicate. These armies are shot. I should be quitting here and saying, look, you know, as soon as 6th Corps stops attacking, it's pretty much over, except I really do need to take this space with the Confederates. I really feel like I have to. And I really feel like maybe I have to try to take Brock's Crossing. But any honest assessment would say these armies, they're not capable of doing it. They might get lucky and drive off an enemy force, but we should probably be calling it right here. And I might. Not until 6th Corps ends its attack, but yeah. And any thought of a third day, you know, I mean, you got to realize what I've got, you know, more than 25% more losses than the Union took over the battle, and nearly, even more than that for the Confederates. So the Confederates are about 80% higher. The Union, let's see, if they were at about 18,000, an extra 6,000 would be about 30% higher. So I've done poorly with my Confederates, but I've really wrecked both armies completely. And there should be no thought of being able to launch another day of combat here. So there's absolutely no way we're going into the third day. The question is whether we're going to stop this before night falls, and I think that's fairly likely. I'll speak a little bit towards the high casualties, though, because I've done this in other games I've played. So it's a huge problem in the old TSS-based games, the Great Battles of the American Civil War, the original granddaddy of all the tactical armies facing each other in a battlefield. And the reason for it is that there's no command and control rules at all. Armies just grind each other down. You know, you'll have routes, you have brigade combat effectiveness, which eventually pulls things off. But basically, as long as anybody in either the advanced TSS rules or some of the later systems, basically both whoever has functioning units still keeps grinding them away, trying to get an advantage, and the battle's over when nobody has functioning units anymore, and you're just sitting there saying it doesn't pay to attack. There's too much of a cost. Because it's in the player's best interests towards the victory points to generally try to capture territory. And that's worth more than the few extra casualties they'll take. In this one, it's especially worth more. It's worth more than destroyed wrecked divisions, you know. So, but the difference here is I have trouble getting things moving and they don't stay fighting. And you would think that would put a significant damper on it. It does. TSS generally, in the middle of second day, we were seeing 100% extra casualties over the entire battle. You know, I mean, we were at twice the casualty ratings that were actually historically occurred over the 3 days of Gettysburg. And you can still keep grinding on with that, you know. And that's one of the reasons I quit a lot of times after 2 days. In this, and in all of the CWB games, you see still inflated casualties, but not at the ridiculous level. They're somewhat believable to the extent that I can kind of look back and say, well, you know, maybe I interpret my rules a little bit, you know, too liberally, and I allow attacks that are, you know, more continuing than the order should really allow for, or whatever. Quite often, no, that's not the case. The truth is, there's not enough of a governor on it, or maybe the casualties are a little too high in the system. I'm not sure which. Unlike TSS, where the casualties really relate very nicely to the weapons, and you can kind of see what the rates are on very short-term scale. Here with the half-hour turns, they may be a little high. Because continuous fighting for several hours in one area with continuous firing going on is really, really unlikely. You run out of ammo, that's the biggie, and the game keeps this continuous flow of ammo, but that continuous flow means you're not putting down an absolutely constant rate of fire going on. There's some resupplying going on, some crap like that, that's not being accounted for, I think, in the combat tables. But I also think the game allows you to attack a little bit longer and defend a little bit longer than maybe you should in most circumstances. This was a bloody battle, but this is much bloodier than it should be. Lee's reconsidering his orders to Hill. He doesn't want to send him down that way. With entrenchments beginning to, well, breastworks beginning to be built, that's just going to be too tough a fight. He was considering sending Longstreet here. That too is too tough a fight. He's wrecked a bunch of Union units. He's just calling it here. He's saying, look, I can hold what I got. It's what I got. I don't think I can go any further. And I think when we score it, it's going to end up remarkably similar to the historical, which is that the Confederates are going to lose the strategic situation, but they're going to win the tactical quite handily. 6th Corps is still operating, but you know what? They're not going to go forward. It's only a question of whether they get wrecked further than they are. So let's look to see, are they permanently wrecked everywhere? And they basically are. Ricketts is not permanently wrecked yet. So I'm gonna say this is the end. I did the Confederate turn, started throwing some entrenchments here. And then for the Union, Meade is being sent with orders to send the 1st of the 5th down here to rejoin, or to join with the 2nd Corps, along with a couple independent brigades over here. I just don't see a point in playing out what's really kind of a hopeless situation. I think we're going to see some sporadic fighting over here until 6th Corps gives it up and pulls back. They'll probably pull back just to the Mill Branch instead of to the Orange Turnpike entrenchments. So I'm going to score this and save me an extra, what would probably be a fairly short video, but a lot of time in playing out, you know, straggle recovery and crap like that I just don't see doing. So scoring it out, basic points are for brigades and divisions being wrecked. I also have to worry about every 5 gun points. I kind of fudged that. I looked at the ones that I have completely destroyed. There might be a point off there one way or another. Leaders, casualties, and then hundreds of strength points are only worth 1 each. What I ended up with as a total there is brigades. Look at the Confederate victory level, 16-5, divisions 14-2. This is why I don't want to attack, is those numbers will get shot to hell. And I think it was the right choice. Leaders, the Confederates killed more Union good leaders, men a little bit, guns about equal. Ends up 38-11. Now that translates over here to the strategic. Each corps wrecked is 2. Now that's not completely, I remember something where it wasn't every division wrecked out of the corps, but I couldn't find it in the errata where that's spelled out. Maybe, yeah, I don't think it's here. I thought it was in the errata that I saw it, but I couldn't find it. If it is every, we have a slightly different situation, because the Confederates managed to wreck one Union corps almost completely. No corps commanders died. And then a point for every 5 tactical victory points, plus the terrain points that we had. And the terrain points came out with the Union getting 7 of them to the Confederates too. Wow, that looks horrible. The Union managed to get some things like the road here and Brock's Crossing that are important to them. The Confederates pretty much got almost nothing that was of any value to them. I think Tuning might be the only thing. Thus, Longstreet's move through here that gave him 4 victory points, well, that was gone. But of course, he demolished the Second Corps, which is 2 points there. Not as much as holding the territory, though. The next thing was corps loss, and this is where I've got some question. If it's every single division of the corps is permanently wrecked, then the Confederates don't get those 2 points. And that's important because for every 5 points of tactical, the Confederates get 7, because 35, 38, whatever. And the Union gets 2, and our totals are 9-11. So the Confederates are 2 points ahead. It's that core point value there, right? That 2 points ahead translates to a Confederate minor strategic victory. If you're within 1 point, it counts as a draw. So it's somewhere between a minor strategic victory and a draw. I don't know which way to look at it. But the Confederates clearly did much better than they did historically here. And had they continued the attack, and the Union's in no position to do so. The 5th Corps is not in terrible shape. It's had time to rest. But man, I don't want to launch it at anything. I look at it, and yeah, it's got a lot of units that are still good over here, like the 2-5 division is still in good shape. But I just do not want to wreck another corps when I don't think I can get anything from it, and I might be opening up a lot of terrain advantage here. So that's what we have here. As a game, let me briefly say what I think about this one. I don't think this would win me over the way Thunder at the Crossroads did. Nothing can do that. It's not Gettysburg. But this is a particularly intriguing one, with these roadways channeling all the movement, because the wilderness is just so nasty, especially for the Union. The Confederates can afford to attack through it, conceivably. The Union really cannot, and they just get hosed by it. So that's really interesting. There are some minor little tweaks I would make to it. For example, taking the Barren Victory rule, where, you know, if the Confederates move through here, they can't score this just because the Union didn't move there, right? Now, I could have, and notionally I did, write orders to go run down and get this, but it's just goofy, right? That's behind my lines. I control that, you know. I shouldn't have to worry about who stepped on it last. And we've got pretty solid lines here that are, you know, the Union holds the stream here. There's no way these are going to get across without a major assault. This major roadway, it's blocked in both directions. Both players have it. The railway, well, if the Confederates want to get down to where the points are, they have to bust their way through Second Corps again. They'll take the minor strategic or even the draw and the heavy tactical victory, and Lee adds to his glories. Grant, probably not so much. His army's pretty damn battered. He took a hell of a lot of casualties here. 24,000 to, well, to 16,000, so it's still a pretty nasty win. Anyway, that's it for this. If you were looking forward to a 3-day extravaganza where we just maul the armies into an ahistorical shape, well, I'm not the person to watch for that. Sometimes I manage to do it anyway, but I tend to rather to prefer ending something on a historically believable note rather than trying to keep pushing for victory continuously when it really isn't going to make a damn bit of difference anyhow. It's decided here. All right, let's send this up.